Hey there, this is Alex Oath in my library in St. Paul, Minnesota. So, about a week ago, I posted a YouTube video on Rosalind Fox Solomon, and I got tremendous feedback for this. It was very gratifying. And then yesterday, I got some bad feedback, which was email from YouTube saying they'd taken it down. And in the email, they said, quote, nudity that's meant to be sexually gratifying isn't allowed on YouTube. I'm appealing this. Who knows if that's going to work? If it doesn't, I'll re-upload the video to Vimeo, hopefully. I'm going to have to pay for a subscription. Annoying, but whatever. Anyway, in the meantime, for those of you that did watch the video, I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts, and then also you can skip ahead if you're watching this. I'm going to share some other recent books that that kind of have an interesting conversation with Rosalind's book. But the first thing I want to tell you is that I just got back from New York, and while I was there, I visited Rosalind in her apartment. It was just a really great visit. She's such a great, funny, interesting person. And I shared with her some of the feedback to the video that I've gotten, some amazing comments. People talked about how they were moved to tears by her book, how they were moved by her story, and it was great. And it was also an opportunity for me to talk with her about some questions that I had, and I want to clear up a couple of mistakes I made in the video. So first of all, so this is the book. I'm not going to flip through it again. Hopefully, I'm not going to cause any scandals by showing this cover. But actually, so the very last picture of the book shows Rosalind at this headstone. And while talking about the book, I suggested that perhaps this was the grave of her mother. Someone commented that that would be a mistake because her mother would have had a different last name, which in fact is accurate. And I asked whose grave that was, and Rosalind informed me that it was her husband's. So that adds just a different kind of twist on the book. Another thing I asked her was about this book, because I speculated that the cover image here is of Rosalind's mother, and once again I was wrong. And she told me that no, her mother wasn't that beautiful. So just two mistakes to clear up. It was interesting that the pictures in the park, let me flip to the page so I don't show you anything too suggestive here, but these pictures that were made in a park, I had suggested that Rosalind took these probably while she was alone, that she wasn't, with anyone, she wasn't having fun with people, and that they were lonely pictures. And this one I got right. She did indeed back that up. So, but that's kind of an interesting thing about looking at photo books, of course, is that you fill in the gaps. You create your own narratives, and sometimes you're wrong, sometimes you're right. Anyway, that's this fantastic book, A Woman I Once Knew. It's really something special, and I hope you check it out. So another book that was published this year that has a really interesting relationship to Solomon's book is Sex, Death, and Transcendence by Linda Troeller. This was published by TBW Books. And a couple interesting things here. First of all, these books just happen to have almost this exact same size, and each book has a tipped in photograph around the same size showing the author and showing the author nude or semi-nude. What's interesting is also the contrast. So you can't really tell here, but this paper, this is like cardboard, gray. It's very dry and almost bland. And this material is like felt. It has this ribbon on the binding. It's very luxurious. And of course, the image is quite different too. While they're both in sort of banal settings, this picture is much more sexualized. And that said, these are both older women. So Linda Troeller is about 20 years younger than Rosalyn Solomon. She's in her 70s, but this is a book of an older woman. So one thing that you'll notice from the get-go is that Troeller is unusually beautiful. She worked as a model as a young woman, and she also had a pretty glamorous life. She interned for Jojo O'Keeffe. She famously lived at the Chelsea Hotel. This is quite a contrast from Solomon, living in Chattanooga with her 2 kids in her mid-30s. The pictures in the book, they're all over the place. So it's not like she shows herself wrinkle-free, but the flavor is different. Although, she shows herself in underwear. She takes, casual selfies. But if you look here and you look closely, there is a kind of a glamour. And, but then this picture could be straight out of Solomon's book. The big difference, besides like the sort of obvious beauty of Troeller and the sort of glamorous and very kind of sexy presentation of this book, is the lack of text. Now, in the back of the book, there is an essay. The essay is by someone named Darcy Steinke. But it's not personal, and it just has a different energy. I love looking at this book. I love touching this book, and I think it's probably one of my favorites of the year. But it didn't do what this book did, which is something truly exceptional. So on this subject of text and image, I want to talk about this book called The Use of Photography. I'm just going to zoom in here. So this book is by the writer Annie Ernaux and the artist Marc Marie. This is actually English translated reprint of Ernaux's book from, let's see here, what is the date? It's originally from 2005. So Ernaux is in her 80s now. She was in her 60s when she wrote this. And Marie, her collaborator, was about 20 years younger. So how to explain this book? Basically, it's mostly text, but there are photographs here and there. I'll just give you a quick glimpse of these photographs just to get a sense of what we're talking about. So what are these pictures? Well, they are pictures that were taken after Ernaux and Marie had sex, and usually the morning after. So they would, in a flurry of lovemaking, throw their clothes off, and then the next morning they would take a snapshot. Either one of them might take the picture, or both of them in some cases. And then they decided to separately, and this is later on, revisit these pictures and write about them. And they would not share their writing with each other until the book was finalized. So it's a peculiar conceit. And it becomes very interesting. I have to say that Ernaux's writing in particular is so vivid. So the important thing to know is that along with Ernaux being older, she also had been diagnosed with breast cancer shortly before she met Marie. And she talks about this in detail and about the fact that his response to this older woman going through this struggle, he wasn't fazed by it at all. And all of these issues of the body and sexuality, you can't really see them in the pictures at all. So you get it in the text. And I'll just give you one glimpse of text. What I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to zoom in on the picture like this. And then I'm going to read you a selection of the text. So this is from Ernaux, and just to point out here that this is a hotel room, and over here are some roses. It's kind of hard to see. And she writes, "The red roses are the ones he gave me on Saturday afternoon. He'd been gone for over an hour, and I thought he'd gone out to phone the woman he'd left. When I opened the door and saw him with the bouquet, I was ashamed of my suspicions, as if the two actions, phoning another woman and giving me flowers, were incompatible. But maybe he phoned and bought flowers. It was in the bathroom of this room that I showed myself to him with my bald head for the first time. We'd been together for 7 weeks. He told me that it suited me. He noticed that my hair was starting to grow back, the faintest white and black baby chick fuzz I had not noticed yet." So the power of this book, it's almost the inverse of Troeller's, where it's all in the words and not in the pictures, though the combination of the two work very well together. So another recently republished and retranslated work by a French author is Suzanne and Louise by Hervé Guibert. Really fascinating to compare both of these books as well. They're very French, they're very literary, and I would say that in each case, photography is kind of secondary. This book is published by the fantastic Magic Hour Press, and it's really a physical book, beautiful to hold, beautiful paper, and highly recommend it. Unlike the other books I'm talking about today, this one is obviously made by a man, but it's about his great aunts. The book does deal with aging and the identity of women as they get older. So in this section here, he talks about how Suzanne and Louise hadn't seen pictures of themselves after the age of 30 until he had photographed them. And he says that Louise, who had never wanted to even show me her hair, which to her was the most intimate thing, agreed to let me photograph it. And so here we get these images of her letting her hair down. Now, I don't think these are necessarily the most extraordinary photographs, but combined with the text, something powerful happens. And this short book builds momentum. One thing I did want to mention is that he actually calls this a photo novel, Suzanne and Louise, a photo novel. And it does have a bit of that quality, although it's a bit more fragmentary, I would say, than an actual novel. What was I going to show you here? So more talk of Louise's hair, and then this section. So here we see one of the sisters on a couch in this white clothing. We're not giving any other information other than this title of a simulacrum. And And then we see her on the couch and her sister in the chair. And then she's touching her feet. And so in this section called The Cadaver, we hear the whole story. It says, Suzanne finally, almost defiantly, proposes something that speaks directly to a desire I had in our photographic relationship. And basically what she asks is to go to the morgue and find out how they treat bodies and basically recreate the process of watching someone die and moving the cadaver. And they're kind of playing out this drama and processing what the death experience is going to be like. And something interesting happens when we turn the page and suddenly we see the two sisters alive and well with the very young Guibert taking his one and only self-portrait in this book with them. And this kind of reminds me actually of the back of Solomon's book, which ends with this picture with Solomon with her grandchild, and who appears to be not such a different age as Guibert in this book. Anyway, I recommend this book. I recommend all three of these two text-heavy books, and then, of course, this combination of text and image with Solomon. So another book I wanted to mention was by the great Mary Frey. This was published also this year by TBW Books. So this cover image, tipped in, feels like a family album. And there's an expectation that we're going to see family photographs. Speaking of which, just one other thing about Mary Frey. She originally became familiar to me with this book, Pleasures and Terrors of Domestic Comfort, which is an exhibition when I was in college. This is 1991, I believe. And Frey probably was like in her early 40s or thereabouts at the time. She had children, I know, and then kind of became less visible in the photography world. So this brings up another issue I'd like to discuss, which is the issue of kind of age and gender, and something else I kind of regret. So about, 15 years ago or so, I published a blog post. And this blog post was an examination of age in photography. I had just turned 40 at the time and was thinking about aging a lot. And I'd read this article on novelists and when they had produced their most significant works. And the title of my blog post was something like, at what age do photographers make their most significant work? And the answer, statistically speaking, was generally between like 28 and 38 or something like that. And I got a lot of blowback for this post. And I think it was deserved because it just wasn't helpful. And it particularly rubbed a number of women the wrong way, including my studio manager, who came to call this the age cage, this 28 to 38 or 30 to 40 sort of cage restriction for the possibility of making great work, which, I tried to point out that I didn't say that this was people's best work. I was just saying the work at which they got the most attention or accolades. But that itself is not helpful. And it's particularly not helpful if you're like a 40-year-old woman who has kids and doesn't have a lot of time and is going to go back to creative work. It's not that motivating to hear something like that, and it's not that useful. And it's interesting because people like Frey, who published this book this year, and a number, I think this is their third book in the last, I don't know, 5-7 years, something like that, that are absolutely fantastic. And I think, I just think those age parameters aren't helpful. Anyway, on to this book. It opens with this. I mean, first of all, it says, for my mother, Matilda, and my sons, Jake and Nick. And it opens with this picture. And sort of like what I said with Solomon, you build in this idea that this is her mother, and that we're opening this box, opening this book of pictures, and we see her mother. That's in fact not her mother. I know that because I read an interview somewhere with her, and I don't know who this is, but it's not her mother, and nor is this her son. But certainly it's like understandable that we would read those pictures that way. And so what we're getting here is a more fragmentary approach. So we make this connection from this opening, this opening of this box and this dollhouse, the family photograph up here, and we don't necessarily know whose family we're looking at, and that's okay. I mean, is it autobiographical work? Yes and no. I mean, it's pictures from this time period in our life. We don't exactly know who these people are or where we are, but we just have an opportunity to look at some absolutely killer pictures. This says, the beginning and the end of the journey are beyond our vision. We see only what is in front of us. So the text in this book is quite generalized, I would say, and doesn't have that diaristic, detailed intensity of Solomon's book. But the pictures have all the detail you could ever want, and they're so specific to their time and their place. I'm not going to go through the whole book. It kicks back between color and black and white. It also feels like we sometimes move into slightly different time periods, and this is most evident at the very end of the book. So she has an acknowledgement page, and then there's this, and it says, it has the book's title, My Mother, My Son, 2016, and then this picture, which is of her mother and her son. So this, in fact, is the one autobiographical picture. It is just absolutely stunning. It's wow. Can we have the top 10 pictures of the year? Because this is my number one. It's just breathtaking. But the book itself is kind of modest, like a family album. Something really special. So one last book that I want to show, I Imagined It Empty by Ruth Lauer Manenti. I don't know exactly how old she is, somewhere in the range of my age, which, I mean, it's funny, when I met with Rosalind Fox Solomon, she asked me my age, and I said 54, and she's like, "You're so young," which was a delight to hear. And so Ruth is also so young. She attended Yale University for painting. She got her MFA there, I don't know when, a long time ago. And she actually recently returned to school and got an MFA in photography at the University of Hartford, where incidentally Mary Frey taught for many, many years. And I also am a visiting critic at Hartford, and I saw Ruth's work and immediately knew that she was something very special. So this book, it's got this feeling of burlap, it's such a physical object. And the book is really something for the hand. So the very first photograph in the book is of a photograph taped to a wall of an older woman. We don't have any information about who this older woman is. And it's going to be a while, but we'll get to it actually at the end of the book. This photograph is of something, it's hard to decipher what it is. It looks like almost like a cocoon, much like this picture taped to the wall. This object is hanging. So it looks like an intervention from the artist. This is the cover image with this cloth. And here again we see cloth. This picture very reminiscent of the photographer Jan Groover. And then this woman again, who appears to be the same woman from the first page. And this looks like a death portrait. And then we go outside to the sea. So this work feels very much like a poem, brings to mind someone like Emily Dickinson. And then this figure sweeping inside the house. Now, I can't see this book objectively because I know Ruth, and thus I know this is Ruth, performing for the camera. And again, I'm not going to go through the entire book, but I just want to take you to the final page, final couple of pages, where we have another picture that looks like a death portrait or even spirit photograph, and then this text. And importantly, this paper is loose, and then we see another picture on a wall mirroring the very first photograph, in this case, a picture of a house. And I'm not going to read the whole text, but I just want to read the beginning section. It says, "My mother rarely let me photograph her, except in the last week of her life, when she changed her mind. Each day, as she approached her death, she became more beautiful. Immediately after she passed, the nurses were in a rush to cover her body and take her away. I wondered why. It seemed so natural that I would want to stay with her for a while." So, wow, that's a lot of death and sex and age and hopefully some transcendence. These are a number of great books. Again, I just want to highlight Rosalind Fox Solomon's book, A Woman I Once Knew. It's really a masterpiece. Hopefully I'll get that YouTube video back up, if not on YouTube, somewhere else. And I appreciate you watching. I really appreciate all the comments. It means a lot to me. Thanks so much.